you have your choice. You can either get up and start doing a few jumping jacks to wake up, or you can just applaud for Dr. Chauhan.
Thank you. I promise this is the last time I'll bore you guys. Okay. All right, guys. Apologize in advance. You guys are all eating, but we'll be talking about diarrhea. Well, it's an interesting topic because we deal with carcinoid diarrhea a lot. One thing I missed talking about in my earlier presentation when we were describing various types or grades of neuroendocrine tumor, one way to classify neuroendocrine tumor is functional, non-functional. About 30% of neuroendocrine tumor patients are classified as functional. That means they have this capability to secrete certain hormone. Based on what hormone they secrete, patient manifests the relevant syndrome. For example, if your neuroendocrine tumor is secreting serotonin, you will develop carcinoid syndrome, which is a triad of flushing, wheezing, diarrhea. And beyond these syndromes, this elevated serotonin can also cause you other issues like fibrosis, carcinoid heart disease, etc. Similarly, if somebody develops insulinoma, where your tumor is secreting too much of insulin, you can have critically low level of sugars, hypoglycemia. If somebody's tumor is secreting a hormone called ACTH, which makes your adrenals secrete tons of corticosteroid hormone, you can develop Cushing syndrome. So what I'm trying to say is, if you can have either functional neuroendocrine tumor, where your tumor secretes hormones, or non-functional. Fortunately, the functional neuroendocrine tumors are minority, about 20 to 40%, more close to maybe 30%. Okay? But if they happen to have that functional tumor, it impacts their quality of life big time. Based on the severity of these functional syndrome, we have had patients who had 20 stools a day. Imagine the quality of life. They cannot get out of house. They can't function. They can't go to public places. I've had patients who had to be admitted, constantly being on octreotide drip, IV fluids, severe dehydration. So it's a spectrum. Okay, we have. So diarrhea is a significant problem. I'd be talking specifically about carcinoid diarrhea for this talk and not other functional syndrome. And diarrhea in neuroendocrine tumor patients is multifactorial. The commonest one, commonest reason being carcinoid diarrhea, but there are other causes of diarrhea. Somebody had their primary tumor resected from bowel, so they develop what's called short gut syndrome. So they have smaller intestines, so the bodies can't absorb all those nutrients, and then they dump a lot of it. Patients who have had gallbladder removed, they have constantly leaking bile into their gut, which irritates the gut and can cause diarrhea. That's because of bile acid diarrhea. Then there could be bacterial overgrowth. There could be steatorrhea because you're not absorbing fats, and that's one of the side effects from analogs. So, and then there could be medication-induced diarrhea. Certain medications like Afinitor or chemotherapy can itself give you diarrhea. So diarrhea in neuroendocrine tumor patients is multifactorial. So what do we do? How do we manage the diarrhea? The current management algorithm is pretty straightforward. Analogs work quite well. In fact, the first publication on sandostatin for carcinoid diarrhea came back in 1986. Dr. Coles presented his data that sandostatin helped reduce diarrhea in 50% of patients, changed the practice. So we started using sandostatin for carcinoid syndrome. Similarly, lanreotide, the more younger version of the similar class of drug, again, was shown to reduce carcinoid syndrome-related diarrhea, and we now have two options. In my mind, they're both same. So physician's preference, what they like. And then most recently, we have a new class of drug, delitrostat. We talked about it, and it was found to reduce carcinoid syndrome diarrhea, and now FDA approved. So our options are somewhat expanding. That's good. But some of you all might be on these two agents. Has this fixed the problem of diarrhea completely? Unfortunately, the answer is never yes to these kind of questions. There's no absolute treatments. There's always some patients who would still have quality of life limiting diarrhea despite maximum therapy. And what do we do? And that's why we need to continue to find new treatments, find better treatments, optimize their syndrome better. In that pursuit, we stumbled upon this product. It's not even a drug, honestly. It's a food, medical food, and you can actually buy it on Amazon. Some hospitals would provide this in their formulary now. I think Sylvester Cancer Center in Florida, University of Kentucky, we recently have that in our pharmacy. So what is Entrade? Entrade is an amino acid-based oral rehydration solution. It has 5 particular amino acids in specific concentration, and it comes in 2 flavors, orange and vanilla. I like orange better. She likes vanilla. I've been telling them, hey, try to make a chai tea latte flavor. How about that? All right. So what is Entrade? How many people have heard about Entrade before? Okay, looks like less than 2%. Good. So hopefully this talk would definitely introduce this product to people who might benefit from it. So Entrade is an amino acid-based oral rehydration solution being researched and was invented at University of Florida. That's where Gatorade also came from. But this came from a different lab altogether. And Dr. Sagar's lab is very well funded, NIH. He got tons of grants, and he studied these amino acid-based oral rehydration solution in mouse models. He radiated these mice. And what happens when you radiate a mice? Their gut sloughs off. That's one of the side effects we see in our chemoradiation patients. Okay? And they develop terrible diarrhea. So when you radiate the mice, they develop terrible diarrhea, dehydration. Unfortunately, they die from it. Okay? This blue line is all the mice dying after they were radiated. And then the scientists resuscitated or gave them amino acid-based oral rehydration solution, but in a random manner, random amino acid. See, everything we eat has amino acids. Steak has amino acid, right? So would random amino acid help? Not really. They did somewhat better than giving normal saline or salt water, but they all died too. What they found, the particular 5 amino acid in that particular concentration were able to salvage the dehydration, and these mice survived. It was very curious, very, very interesting finding. And then they further researched this and trying to find why is that the case. And what they found is those particular 4 or 5 amino acids were able to stimulate stem cells in your gut and help your gut regenerate faster. And recently, in a very high-impact scientific publication, scientific reports in 2016, they published, and they actually figured this out. So these are called villi. Our gut is lined by these villi, and this is how our body absorbs nutrients from food. After taking chemotherapy or radiation, these villi are sloughed off. They are blunted. But after treating these mice with Entrade, what they found, that the growth of villi, there was a marked regeneration of this. And no wonder why we were able to salvage these mice and get their dehydration fixed, and these survived. So, okay, we fixed the chemo or radiation-induced dehydration problem in mice, but does it work in humans? Okay, so what's the current evidence? There were a couple of studies done in humans with Entrade. First one was sponsored by, I think, the Division or Department of Defense, and healthy U.S. Army candidate. About 26 patients were treated. They were made to get dehydrated, either by giving them diuretics or making them exercise, run out in heat. And then they were rehydrated with a popular sports drink. I don't know if it was Gatorade, but something similar. And then Entrade. And you can see these results are published. A significant greater fluid retention with Entrade, 75% with 57%. So there's something physiologically that amino acid-based oral rehydration solution works better than the commercial sports drink. Similarly, there's another study which was conducted in University of Florida, and they analyzed or reviewed patients' experience with Entrade, and these are the patients who were treated with chemotherapy, radiation for various malignancy, colon cancer, rectal cancer, terrible diarrhea, and they improved significant 78% improvement in their symptoms, GI symptoms after taking this. Okay. What about Entrade in NETs? So this meeting is more focused on neuroendocrine tumors, right? We don't know why it works in neuroendocrine tumor patients, or we have no idea because we have not studied it in neuroendocrine models. We are trying to study them in NET carcinoid models so that we can know microscopically what's really happening. Why should it work in neuroendocrine tumor patient? However, how we stumbled upon it, a nutritionist is a very integral part of our neuroendocrine tumor clinic at Marquis. And all of my patients, Dr. Anthony's patients, who have GI issues, they definitely see a nutritionist that same day. And they do a lot of counseling, etc. And Rachel, our dietitian, she happened to give certain patients these samples for Entrade, and then got a pleasant callback from one of the patients one fine day, this is last year, that, hey, my diarrhea improved quite a bit. And I was skeptical, and I kind of said, no, this is probably nothing, you know. How can amino acid-based food product fix this, you know? Too good to be true. So didn't pay too much attention on it. She and Dr. Anthony were kind of treating more and more patients with this. And then when I heard more and more about that, some patients were really vouching for it, and they were very impressed how it helped to reduce their diarrheal symptoms. Then I formally took up the project, said, let's study this, and then kind of come up with the actual data. So did a small study last year, fall of last year, and analyzed all the patients who were in Marquis treated for neuroendocrine tumor patients treated for diarrhea with Entrade. And our protocol is usually to give 8-ounce bottles 2 times a day for at least 2 weeks. So as you can see, our group of study patients belong to the usual mid-gut neuroendocrine tumors, lung neuroendocrine tumors, PNETs, gastric nets, unknown primary, so all sort of spectrum of neuroendocrine tumors. About half of them had surgeries done on their bowels, and then about more than half were on either lanreotide or sandostatin. So typical neuroendocrine tumor patient population, nothing out of blue. Got an IRB approval, did the whole study, figured out, and what we found out that about 33 of these 41 patients had reported some degree of benefit. It could be short benefit or profound benefit, but some degree of benefit. But what was more interesting and surprising, 19 of these 33 responders had more than 50% reduction in diarrhea. That's huge. at least as a medical oncologist, not used to seeing that drastic results. Okay, so we presented this data at last year NANETS and then GI ASCO. The data is very, very interesting. 57% reduction in more than 50% reduction in diarrhea. That's huge. So it led us to design an actual phase 2 clinical trial, because whenever we do retrospective study, there's a lot of noise in the data. These patients might not have taken full 2 weeks, or they might be going through something else which made their diarrhea worse and now it resolved. So there's a lot of noise in that. So to really confirm whether the product works and to what degree it works, we have to do an actual phase 2 study. So we are in talks with Mount Sinai and Moffitt Cancer Center to do a multi-center clinical trial. The good news is the trial's already open at Marquee, and we have enrolled about I think 4 or 5 patients already. The trial started about a month back, and this is a trial schema. We are studying 2 cohorts of patients. One is your neuroendocrine carcinoid syndrome patients. These are the ones which secrete serotonin, have flushing and diarrhea. And the other are non-carcinoid neuroendocrine tumor patients, and they still have diarrhea for various other reasons, as mentioned, short gut syndrome or drug-induced diarrhea, etc. We'll do a flush out where they'll be just watched for first 28 days. They'll have a stool diary. They'll watch and note down what's their average frequency of stool. And then in next 28 days, they'll get treated with Entrade 8 ounces 2 times a day. And this will tell us whether it works or not. We should be able to note decline in the daily stool if the product works. So far, at least anecdotally, we now have treated over 70 patients with Entrade and with overwhelming success. So we want to conduct this prospective study so that people outside Marquee can also review the data and then proceed accordingly. So this was our short presentation on Entrade. The trial is open for accrual. If somebody's around University of Kentucky, Lexington area, we're very happy to screen. Great, fantastic. But if not, my closing comments would be this: I feel very safe in kind of at least letting you all know about this product, because this is medical food. This is not a drug, does not have side effect. And I think there's a subset of patient population where it works. So give it a try for 1 week. If it works for you, you have another thing which you can add on for those rainy days. And you can order it on Amazon. It's pretty straightforward. If it doesn't work, then it didn't work, and then you try another beverage, okay? And my only pet peeve is hopefully, I think Entrade people are here, can make it a little bit cheaper. So I'll be happy to take questions later. Thank you.